Of the 4 OG heroes in Flesh and Blood, the ones from WTR, Bravo has easily demonstrated to be the most consistent across the various metas of Flesh and Blood. Easily one of the best starter heroes, heavy blue Anathos builds can hammer their way into the top of Mini and Armory. Pepper in some crush effects for control in various matches, and Bravo can be quite the force to deal with. Josh Mattison is our resident Bravo player, and he joins us tonight to talk Bravo. He's brought us a CC list and a Blitz list, and we're going to talk Bravo in all formats. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Go Again, a fabulous cast here on Dice Commando. I'm Andrew, here today with Joshua Mattison, aka Tabombadil, who is our Dice Commando team resident Bravo player. Just in the last season, he top-8'd skirmishes and RTN and then piloted Bravo to a 19th place finish at the Portland Battle Hardened event. How's it going, my man?
It's going really good. I'm excited to be here and talk about one of my favorite heroes in the game.
I mean, whenever we see you, we just assume you're running Bravo. But
yeah, I kind of just worry people are going to be like, they just see me and they're like, oh God, I got to hear about Anathos for the next 15 minutes.
Yeah, fair enough. That's a pretty good weapon. So, all right, well, so as we mentioned, he is a member of the DC team. If you would like to join up with us, you can do that by somewhere down here-ish. It's the right next to the subscribe button, there's the join up button. You can evaluate the different membership plans, what works for you. Join us on our Discord, and we're talking all sorts of random stuff all the time, most of it Fab-related. And it's pretty great. We also had the summer tournament very recently. How did that go for you, sir?
It went pretty good. I made it to the finals where I faced Simon, and I was able to take it down in a Viserai mirror. That was a lot of fun, and I was really happy with how that went. Honestly, I chose Viserai, and I didn't expect it to go as well as it did. And honestly, that was why I joined in the first place. I'd watched your videos since you started making Destiny videos, and I saw your tournament for the last one. I went, I think I should join. I've been watching the videos long enough. That looks cool. And it's been a blast. The people in the community are all really nice. Getting to play in the tournaments has let me play with people all over the world. And it's just been a really great thing for, at the Battle Hardened, there's suddenly a community of people who it's oh, I know these people. And it feels really nice.
Yes. And are you going down to Worlds? Or Worlds weekend, I should say? No? All right. Well, we're going to have team shirts anyway. So maybe you'll get one regardless. But so that's kind of a funny intro, right? Actually, because you're like, yeah, just won it on Viserai, and I'm like, yeah, this is our resident Bravo player taking down the DC Summer Tourney on Viserai. So why did you pivot there, and then more importantly, why did you pivot? Because that finished up before Battle Hardened did. So why did you pivot there, and then why did you pivot back?
Yeah. So I had been wanting to play Viserai since pre-Everfest season, and then he was really good. They nerfed Scalata, and I switched to Briar and did really well with her just because I think that's a powerful hero. I took her to a top 8 of a Pro Quest the first time I ever played her. I think Channel Mount Heroic was I was like, oh, okay, this is great. But Viserai, I chose him now because I wanted to get back into a Runeblade that wasn't Briar. Because although she's good, she relies on Channel Mount Heroic. You win off that card. But with Viserai, I don't know, I felt like there might be some room to learn. There's a lot of play lines in it, and there's a lot of you could make 20 different plays or and only one of them is the most optimal, and it's hard to read that. So it's nice to get the practice playing something that's difficult in a way I'm not used to. And I played the Belittle list that Hayden Dale from the Arsenal Pass podcast had originally put out there. I made a couple of changes. Archer Taylor had been on it, and we were talking. He felt it was really good, so I kept playing it, and I chose it for this because I play Bravo all the time. It's really nice to try different things, especially in a tournament setting where you have to stick to it. and it's a powerful list. It was really fun.
So then you just flipped back for the Battle Hardened because you were going with Old Faithful, or
I think so. It's partly going with Old Faithful, partly kind of it. It's like Bravo is so core to my Flesh and Blood experience, and I feel so comfortable with it that it felt like for something that, like the Battle Hardened, where there's like real stuff on the line. I wanted to play the deck I felt most comfortable with, and that was Bravo. In retrospect, I don't think I'd change the hero I bring. I had some unfortunate pairings later in the tournament that they just locked me out of it. The players won because they were excellent players and they outplayed me, but also the decks were hard decks to beat. I played Ryan, who top eighted on Dash, and he slotted in Red Unmovables and he slotted in Fate Foreseen and Sink Below. Both would, all of that. He got to 2 Purifiers, 3 Induction Chambers, and at that point the game was over. Dash is hard if they run that package. And then I played into Prism after what happened was, played into Prism after that in the last round, and I had a really good lead. There were a few things that I did suboptimally, and I think regardless of if they were suboptimal, I just didn't have it, and that's just the way Prism goes.
That's a tough match.
It's a tough match. It's definitely winnable with the list that I sent to you. There are a couple of changes from it, like Time Skippers was in the list, but it served a different purpose than it did like a year ago when people were just starting to play Bravo into Prism. But yeah, I really love the hero. I love how comfortable I feel playing it, so I chose that.
No, I mean that's solid. So you actually just kind of led into where we're going with the you were talking deck lists. So he's been kind enough to share with us 2 deck lists. The first we'll go through is his CC list, but then we're going to go through his Blitz list, which is the one unfortunately that knocked me out of a top 8 at Gangai. But all good. That was a crazy match actually. We fatigued each other. I was on Velda. So we'll go through those 2, but first, before we do, can you talk to us just, kind of like a high-level 10,000-foot theory difference, right, pure theory here on constructing a deck for the same hero for CC, or for Bravo in this case, for CC versus Blitz?
Yeah. The thing that's nice about Bravo is there's some pretty clear differences that are, once you understand the list, pretty obvious why you make them. In Classic Constructed, I don't think I've ever cut Fate Foreseen or Sink Below from the list. I don't run them in every matchup. Into Prism, you take them out. Into Dromai, you take them out. But they're in the list. The same thing goes for, you're likely to play, maybe you'll slot in a Remembrance. That's less likely to play in Blitz, because you can't side these things out. So it becomes harder to justify Bravo wants blue attacks that cost more than 3, and you want about 3 of those in your hand, and then Crippling Crush or some other power card so you can threaten, or at least 2 blues that cost 3. So you're actively changing how your deck looks per matchup. You have a lot of options, but if you're running Fate Foreseen and Sink Below in Blitz, if you draw 2 of those, sure, you might be able to stop your opponent, but if it's Dromai, I don't know how Dromai does in Blitz, I guess, so that's probably not relevant, but Kassai, I don't really want to do that at Kassai. I might stop 2 Sword Swings and then I stop damage, but what am I doing back? Maybe it's Anthos for 6, maybe it's Anthos for 4 Arsenal, maybe it's just Anthos for 4 because I blocked with 3 cards. The cards aren't good in a lot of matchups in Blitz because you're just playing too slow. In Blitz, you want to go really hard. You can lean into the blocks that Bravo has. He only has very few block 2s. Rouse the Ancients and Pummel are about it. And honestly, it just comes down to that. I still run about maximum blue and red Pummel, I think, in both list variants, because if they see the reds are gone and they say, oh, I don't have to worry about Pummel anymore, then you have, a backup to say, well, maybe you do. Then also, sometimes you'll run, depending on the meta, red Staunch in Classic Constructed. That's something that I might think about going forward because Guardian and Dory might be good. But in my Blitz list, which we'll look at in a second, I picked red Steadfast, which is arguably as good or worse than Oasis Respite, but there's niche situations in Blitz where it's good, and enough of them that I feel like it matters, because Wizard can just kill you. Especially Kato. It might be worse into Icelander. It won me a game against Icelander, but I think if Icelander gets the Frox Texas out, it doesn't matter. But it's also good into Kassai, which is a bad matchup, and having another tool there helps. It's good into Guardian if they dominate.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Steadfast, because let's just be honest, there's a lot more Wizards in Blitz, right? So it makes sense to have, yes, but that's your choice over Oasis. But enough of that. Let's get into the list. So what I'll do is I'll just read this top down, and you can poke in on any points of interest that you want to point out as we go. So actually, let's just start. Weapons, Anathos only, no Sledge.
So in Classic Constructed, I've never run Sledge, but that's probably something that might change. Islander's really good at disrupting you, and if you're playing Anathos in AB3 with Tectonic Plating, if you activate Tectonic Plating, it gives them time to respond, and you might lose tempo. But at the same time, if you have enough blues, you might still be able to swing Anathos. What's nice about Sledge is it lets you just swing 6, and they don't have time to respond to the attack before you do it. That's the only reason I would consider running Sledge right now is Icelander. I wouldn't do it for Kano. AB4 into Kano is like not enough. Their combo still comes in for 5 or 6 on the Aether Wildfire. Also, I guess Titan's Fist Rampart would be something for a slower meta. Right now, you can't Fatigueify, especially Oldhim can't really Fatigueify that well. Bravo's super not going to do it. You don't play that game plan into Briar right now. You especially don't do it into Viserai, because Viserai just gets too much value off of a 5-card hand.
Yeah. So we're making bad TV right now because we're hopping around. But you had no. This is on me. You had already talked about Staunch, and that was one of the questions I was going to ask, because you were just talking about the shield. So Staunch and shield seems to go pretty good together, right?
It does. But the thing about sorry, I'm cutting you off. My bad.
Oh yeah, okay.
Well, I was going to say the thing about Staunch is like the matchups where you want to play the shield, it's often that you're blocking smaller things. So like Briar can play Channel Mount Heroic turns, but often the game plan into Briar when they play a Channel Mount Heroic is like hopefully you have a crippling or a spinal in your arsenal that you can wait. You're going to take damage the turn they play the Channel Mount Heroic, and then you're going to respond with a dominated crippling or spinal with a pummel, so that you reduce their total hand size from 4 to whatever, so that their Channel Mount Heroic doesn't really do much. Honestly, I only run Red Staunch into the matchups where it needs to stop something that's coming in for a lot, and that would be Bravo, Oldhim, Dory. I wouldn't play it into Rhinar. He comes in for a lot, but if he intimidates it, it's feel bad.
Got it. So it looks good on paper, bad in practice is what I'm taking.
I would prioritize the Oasis more in that matchup, honestly, because Oasis Rampart is probably better value. I mean, you might lose a resource, but like if it's into Briar, Staunch Response into Rosetta Thorn doesn't really do anything. But Oasis into Rosetta Thorn gains you life maybe and stops an entire 4. But
and it carries for sabers and pistols, right? So
yeah.
All right, fair enough. So without further ado, back to the list. So Crater Fist, no surprise there. The crown is freaking nominal. You're on the Iron Rot legs, the Null Rune boots, gloves, and hood, and then Tectonic. So Tectonic's your staple. It's always there. And then Iron Rot legs, so you're not doing the Andrew Jank package where you're running the snappies, right?
No, and I don't know if you want to talk about the Tome of Fyendal thing later. We can, but that is something that kind of ties into equipment, is the Mage Master Boots Tome of Fyendal. I ran that up until maybe Tails, and after into Everfest season, I think I cut it out just because things got so fast that like it's so hard to make that play and feel good about it, because you have to, park it in Arsenal. You have to keep enough cards in your hand for it to matter. So like if you block and you got 1 card in hand, you draw 2, gain 2 life, like it sucks. And like a lot of decks are going to pressure you so hard that you might not gain enough life that it matters, which stinks, because it's a really great play. You suddenly have a 5-card hand and you can do some dirty things. 5 cards in Bravo can be Rouse the Ancients, Crippling Crush.
Yeah, I mean that is scary. But you're right. If you take 15 damage to get there. But yeah.
Briar could send like 30 damage too, and that
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, got to turn off those card draws for sure. All right, red package is Chokeslam, CNC, Cripplings, E-Strikes, Fates, and Oasis. You actually spoke to both those already. You are running 2 copies of Pulverize, 3 red Pummels, 3 red Sinks, 3 Spinals, and then 3 red Beltings. We have yellow Remembrance. You kind of spoke to that as well. Which ones do you side that in for?
The same ones I'd side in for Staunch Response, mainly just Dory, Oldhim, Bravo matchups where you know you're going to see your second cycle of the deck. Because you might have to block with a Crippling Crush, you might have to block with Spinal Crush, or you might play out enough of your threats that you want to get them back in the deck. And often, like, Crippling Crush early in the game, if you're going to Remembrance, is a decent target, but like often you Remembrance later in the game. And cards like Terra Sunder and Spinal Crush are usually a little better, even though they're less damage in a matchup where you're grindy, you're going to have low health, so you're going to block a lot, and you want to prioritize plays that you can do off of a 3-card hand or a 2-card hand in Arsenal.
Got it. Makes sense. All right, now into the blues. Most of this is kind of autopilot Guardian, right? We've got Bucklings, Chokeslams, Cranials, Debilitates, Disabled. Talk to me about Imposing Visage.
Yeah, it's one of the... So, Guardian got so much love in Everfest. And if Pulverize didn't exist, I'd say Imposing is like one of my favorite cards from the set. But Imposing, what it does is it essentially says Showtime has go again, or turn 1 you get a pummel. Or not a pummel, turn 1 you get a Pulverize, which is absolutely bonkers. A Pulverize off of a Showtime, which is the best turn 1 play this deck can have, is you draw 3 blues and Imposing Visage, because then you pay 6, Imposing, put out Showtime, get Pulverize, Arsenal it. And then you've got 3 Surges, a Pulverize, and Arsenal. And the nice thing is you have Crown of Providence now. So say they come at you with something like a CNC, and you don't want to block. So you just say, here's the Crown. I'm going to have a 6-card hand and 3 Seismic Surges. So it's really powerful. And it also says, like, one thing Bravo struggles with is if you draw, like, 4 blues, and all of them kind of suck. So, like, say you drew, like, 2 Buckling Blows, a Debilitate, and then a Pummel. Well, what's really nice is you can, or sorry, one of those cards is Imposing Visage. So, like, not Pummel, Imposing Visage. So you say, okay, I don't really want to play any of these attacks because they're the hammer and I'm not threatening a Pummel. You can play Imposing, get your Showtime, still swing hammer, and park like a Crippling and Arsenal that you get off the Showtime. You don't do that play as often just because those hands aren't going to happen too often. They happen, but, like, you have to have Imposing to capitalize on.
Got it. Yeah, fair enough. It's more fuel for your Pulverize fire. Macho Blue is, I think it's fair to say that's a staple now.
Yeah.
Pummel Blue, people go back and forth between Pummel Yellow, Pummel Blue, but it's, he's running 3 Pummel Blues. You're running 3 Rouse, so why 3 over 2? Where'd you land on 3?
So I will admit, too, like we talked about this beforehand, this is essentially Cale McCreath's list. With a couple of changes. Time Skippers is out of the list. There's one change. Time Skippers is out of the list. And I have fights. There's other things that, like, in retrospect, I want to change more. But the thing is, I think since Monarch, I have always run 3 Rouse the Ancients, and most of the time have run 3 Zealous Beltings. Bravo needs to be aggressive into certain matchups. Prism specifically was the matchup where you said, I need as much go again as possible. And then there's decks like Dash where you need that as well. It's really good into Guardian mirrors because Guardian is who can do more damage. And even though 13 damage isn't like the most, in Guardian it's great because it's like, okay, I'm not just coming in for 6 damage. You have to block 7 and then 6, so you're going to choose which one you want to block. It's a really good value card. It blocks 2, so you can side it out for matchups where you say, like, I need to block more. But right now, this deck has 39 blues in it. You rarely side any blues out. There's, like, one matchup that, like, Kayo ever sided one out, and that was Dromai. He took the Staunch Responses out. I can see that it might feel like a bad value card, but it's really easy to line up in the deck, especially when looking at the blues and the reds. I don't run the list doesn't have Blessing of Deliverance. It doesn't have Embolden. The only aura we run is Showtime, so there's not as much difficulty getting power in your hand to represent the Rouse turning on. So you could even arsenal the card, and that's another nice thing about the Crown. Is like, oh, I arsenaled Rouse. It's kind of stinky though. I'm gonna get rid of it, but it's a really powerful card, and I think it's really necessary into a lot of matchups because it just means that you have an extra 7 damage that they didn't think you could have, and you can pummel it. You know, they might say, "Oh, I'm just not going to block this," and then you still get a card from their hand, and they take 11 damage.
Yeah, fair enough. Terra Sunder makes perfect sense, and then Thunderquake is kind of a new staple. I think I know some people don't like it, but it seems pretty legit, right? The key there, because that one's worth 6, right?
It's cost 6, comes in for 8.
For 8, yeah, for 8, yeah.
And that's another nice thing is, so if we're talking about turning on Rouse, we have 2 cards out of Everfest that like make that much easier. 3 cards that make it much easier. We have Thunderquake for 8, Macho Grande for 8, and then Pulverize, which just turns it on its own.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well now let me flip over to the Blitz list, and we'll do the same drill. Now, one thing you'll notice out of the gate here is that you're not running a full suite of what do we call it, the loadout, right? The loadout's not chock full, so you just have Anathos, the Fist, Providence, the legs, the boots, the gloves, the Null Rune boots, gloves, hood, the Quelling slippers, and then Tectonic plating. Anything we're missing there?
No, I didn't own a sledge, so
okay.
I just went, this is fine. And then I think I counted and went, I think this is 10. And I think I missed one here, because what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah. So I think I was like, well, I could bring AB4, but I knew that I was never going to play it. And then the only other thing is like, well, maybe I put in time skippers, but that doesn't matter. So no, I won't do that. So there was no other option that I particularly felt was good enough to warrant the 10th slot.
Yeah. So I mean, you could always, if you're worried about AB4, you can always go Fist, Lantern, right? And
yeah,
I would still run Anathos personally. Being an Anathos player on Velda, like into Wizards, it feels pretty good to swing for 3 and then block 3, and all of a sudden you're swinging 6. That feels pretty good. So.
And the thing is too in that matchup is like you rely on the hammer a decent amount that you like can't just like present 4 because they're gonna get their combo. They're not gonna worry too much to get there.
Yeah, completely fair. All right, so you'll notice no yellows in this particular list. So 2 choke slams, 2 crippling, 2 pulverize, 2 pummel, 2 red sigils. That card freaking killed me in our matchup. That was a great call. 2 spinals, and then 2 red steadfast. And then for blue, buckling, choke, cranial, debilitate, disable. Does have visage again, as well as macho, the blue pummels. 2 rouse, showtimes, staunch, tear, and then thunderquake blue. So what's the overall strategy with this in a super fast game for Guardians who are kind of a little slower? How do you run this list?
Sure. I mean, the first thing is try to go first so you can get your imposing visage or showtime in your hand and get pulverize and arsenal. Because that's just in Blitz, when you have 20 life, 14 damage is ridiculous. And off of showtime, you can do things like tear asunder, pulverize. It's off of a 5-card hand. It's perfectly possible. You could, yeah. But other from that, like you're threatening them with big on hits, dominates, and pummels as Bravo does. But there's different things that target different decks. I was unsure the time that I played this how good Vi was going to be in Blitz. So Chokeslam stayed in the list because I figured, people are going to gain attack. It's probably a good value one. I also... This is actually, I just realizing I didn't update this in the list. I didn't play the Chokeslams. I actually changed these to Righteous Cleansings because I was thinking...
Oh, that's the yellow 7/10, yeah.
Yeah, that's my bad. I sent you the wrong thing there, but
no worries.
I played that over Chokeslam because I felt like 10 damage is a lot, and I really like that one to throw out with no dominate because if they don't block it, you do shenanigans, cool, and they take 10 damage. And if they do block it, well, then you have more time for your setup. That's the big thing with Bravo is you want to reduce your opponent's hand size, and you want to be able to continue to put on pressure. You will have off turns, so if you can guarantee that your opponent can't do much on those off turns, you can stay in the game. You're just playing to your power cards. Crippling Crush and Spinal Crush do a lot when they only have 20 life. Sigil of Solace is really great because you can treat it the same way you would treat. You can bluff a pummel with it, is basically what it is. It's a great card to throw in your arsenal. So if you swing Anathos for 6 and you only have 1 card left, or some play along those lines where you have 1, it's really easy to think, I'm just going to play this Sigil, because then the 3 life, if I gain it now or later, what's the difference? Mm-hmm. But the thing about Sigil is great is you throw it in your arsenal, you're still going to gain 3 life. You have that 5th card there. You swing something with 2 floating. Your opponent has to sweat for that. They have to think about it. They don't know if it's a pummel. And after the first time, they say they overblock. Great, they still think it's a pummel. If they don't and you don't pummel them, that's fine. You just keep that in your arsenal until you have a better arsenal target. And I also think into other Guardians, it's really great. Like you said in our matchup, it did a lot of work because they're grindy games, and every point of life matters there. Also in Wizard, I like it because it essentially, like, other from Aether Icevein, they're vanilla arcane attacks in Icelander, and then Kano has just a lot of vanilla stuff. It's nice to just say, okay, it's essentially a block 3 for arcane. Mm-hmm. Or if Icelander's trying to kill you off frostbites, if you have enough blues and you have that parked in your arsenal, you can play it and pay for it to stop yourself from dying.
Mm-hmm. No, it makes sense, and it's also good because Ira's not done with her run around Blitz. She still pokes her head up, and that's 3 Kodachi hits, right?
Great tools. Also, Benji. That's the entire reason Quelling Slippers.
Good point.
I was worried about Benji, and I went, Quelling Slippers could be good there. I ran it against Billy's Benji, and I got good value out of it.
Sure. Yeah, blue for 3 block. That's not bad. That's a good call. I might have to steal that.
We talked about Steadfast and Blitz and why it's... The thing that's interesting about the card is into Wizard, Oasis Respite does the exact same thing off of a blue. The only reason I didn't pick Oasis Respite is because Kassai is a really bad matchup and Steadfast does more there.
Got it. Because again, it carries, right? If she has a blood on her hands, it carries. So, because it shuts off, it prevents damage from that source, right? So if they swing again with the same sword, it continues. And actually, right. it should work for... Well, I guess Dory's not swinging again if she doesn't hit again, so I guess that doesn't matter, but fair enough.
And it doesn't count as a defending card for Dory, which is another nice thing.
Right. Yeah. All right, awesome. Well, I had a couple questions for you, if you don't mind, but thanks for sharing those lists with us. I will put links to those lists in the comments of the video, and obviously, as he mentioned, it's largely Kale's list, but there's nothing wrong with stealing and sharing and then putting your own spin on it, right?
He's the Guardian guy.
He's no joke. No joke.
I was running a different list before his came out, and then his was just obviously better.
Fair enough. Fair enough, right? Like, why not? All right, so Showtime. You had kind of talked me through this offline, but I learned a lot about Showtime. So I didn't really get in Blitz how that was working. So can you explain for the other people who hadn't previously seen the lights like I have, kind of walk me through why that's worth playing in Blitz?
Sure. So the thing about Bravo is one of the most important things a card can be is a blue card that costs more than 3 that blocks for 3. Because...
Well, cost 3 or more. 3 or more, you mean.
3 or more,
yeah.
Right. The thing that's nice about Showtime is on turn 1, it's one of the most powerful cards you can draw. But after turn 1, it's kind of a tempo negative play, and you're often not going to play it. You're going to block with it or pitch it, and that's okay, because if you draw it turn 1, it's incredibly powerful. If you have Imposing Visage and you need to make a play with it because your hand stinks, it's incredibly powerful. But Showtime on its own, against a lot of decks, you're not just going to play it. So it's one of those cards that at face value, you could be right that it seems really underwhelming. You're never going to play this card. It has a really powerful effect, but it doesn't have go again. So why would I want to play it? And it's just because when it's good, it's incredibly good. But the thing about Bravo is you get used to having cards in the deck that it's not like an aggro deck where it's like, oh, I drew a bunch of cards that I don't want to block with. With Bravo, you draw a bunch of cards, and as long as they don't say Crippling Crush, you're like, oh, cool, I'm going to throw these out. And I'm like, you still block with Crippling Crush sometimes.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. All right, so we brought up Thunderquake, and actually we're on Pulverize as well. So let's talk a bit about heaving. Natan, when he was on a couple videos ago, he was pretty negative on heaving. So I kind of wanted to see what and he had a very mathematical way to back that up, right? As you would expect. But I'm curious what your take on it is. Do you ever heave anything other than Pulverize? Basically, that's the question.
Yes, is the short answer, I suppose. But also, Natan's probably way smarter and more right about it than I'll be. But I go from the gut of more seismic surge better. So
okay, fair enough.
Number big. So, but like the thing is, if you have one of those stinky hands that's got 4 blues, the nice thing about a blue Thunderquake in Arsenal is it means that you can block with 3 cards and then still send 8 damage to your opponent, which is really good value. That's that's a lot in a matchup where you're trying to preserve health. Heave on its own though can be tough to pull off. Like Pulverize, I oddly enough found myself playing it more unheaved because you play it off of 1 surge and 3 blues, and it's still just 14 damage. So they need to either respect it or take 14, which is oddly enough the way it usually goes. Is they try to block it and just don't have a turn, or they just take it at face value. There's no like I'll block a little bit. It's usually just I'll eat it, which is I don't know. The effect is really powerful, but it's not as powerful as some of the other effects. It's just a lot of damage, and then like, -4. But I'm sorry, I'm rambling on that. It's the heave, I think is good, but the cards that we have that heave aren't overwhelmingly like crazy. Pulverize is a fantastic card with a high cost. In Bravo with the right tools, it does a lot. It helped a lot into Prism, but there's a lot of matchups you don't play that card into. Like into Briar, like Kayo has his whole sideboard thing, but like Fi and Briar, you don't play that into them because if you throw Pulverize in Arsenal, you need to play it. If you don't have Crown of Providence and it gets stuck in there, you're screwed. So it's like, okay, you can't heave it in Briar where she's going to be like, okay, snatch for 7. What are you going to do about it? Or Fi where they go so wide if you just like don't respect it. Heave is really situational. It's a really cool mechanic, and I think it's good, but I think that the thing is you're just banking 3 for later. It's not explicitly free. It's really good, but I don't have like math to back up anything, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not free because you have to have 2 cards on the back end, right? Which is expensive in this game.
Yeah, right. It means you're swinging for only 6 off of a 4-card hand, which there's a lot of matchups where you can't afford to just like let them do that. And also, I understand where Natan's coming from too. Like, I'm sure he's thinking about Bravo as well, but also as an Oldhim player, like he can't heave because like Crown of Seed says face down, so it's a very bad thing.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, and then actually last question I had from you was Pulverize and its role in CC and Blitz, but I think we kind of covered that. So
just a massive tempo swing. Yeah. If they take 14 damage at Blitz, they're at 6 life. Like, that's great, but...
Yeah, and I do want to remind everybody, because you get in the mindset of Crush, and Pulverize is not a Crush. Pulverize is a non-hit. So
take 1.
It's pretty big. It's pretty big. In all senses, it's pretty big. I think it's even fair to say it's literally pretty big.
It's the biggest.
So, all right, fair enough, man. Well, thanks for this. It's been great talking with you. So the kind of the background for the folks is why I've been looking at, I'm on my way to some tournaments here in the future, and I've been thinking about maybe going Bravo just with the way that things are shaping up, and I, had to go to the smart kids for some advice. So I figured we'd do it here and film it, and so thanks for taking the time, especially because I know you just went back to school, so appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I'm really glad to be able to talk on the internet about something and maybe sound like a dummy.
Well, or maybe sound intelligent. Just maybe. Maybe. All right, well, any plugs to throw out there before we call it an evening?
I guess shout out to Dice Commando. Thanks for having me on. Be a Dice Commando team member. What are you doing with your life?
There you go. I think it's a good value. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I think it's a great value in gaming. You can pop on and, for $2, I think, it's a $2 membership, the DC Tech and Strategy. You can listen to me ramble about deck techs and pull these guys on and hang out with us in the Discord. So all good. Well, again, I really appreciate it. I know you kind of changed your Sunday night to make this happen, and I appreciate it. And say it with me, man.
Go Commando.